Welcome, everyone. This is Online for Authors, and today, my guest today is Christine Gunderson. She's the author of the debut novel, Friends with Secrets. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you.
I feel like I know Nikki, or I knew her before, at least her work in television, in the newsroom while raising the children. Mine were a little older. And I worked full-time in the newsroom, but motherhood challenges were still similar. Before we get into the story with Nikki, let's tell our audience about your novel. Give me the, I guess we call it the elevator pitch.
Well, Friends with Secrets is a novel about motherhood. It's about the challenges. It's about the rewards. And it's a story of two very different mothers. One appears to be perfect on the outside. One does not appear to be perfect on the outside, and together they join forces to take down a predator and protect the kids at their children's school. And in the process, one of the mothers, Ainsley, has to choose between protecting the kids and protecting a deep, dark secret, which threatens to unravel her husband's career and her marriage and the life that she has carefully built. So Friends with Secrets is about motherhood, it's about secrets, and it is most importantly, I feel, about the power of female friendship.
It is female friendship, but it's also, in my review of you, I wrote of the book, I wrote that, you know how when we were working in the industry, we were always told you can have everything, but you just can't have it at the same time. You can't have it all at the same time. And this book proved it wrong. I mean, she did end up having all of it at the same time. So I understand that you had a stint in a newsroom yourself. Was that any part of the inspiration for Friends with Secrets?
You know, I worked in a newsroom when I was in my early 20s after college. I was a weekend anchor and a weekday reporter at a small ABC affiliate in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I loved that job so much. And it's one of those rare jobs where you sort of feel like every part of your personality was created in order to do this job. And Nikki is a character who is very similar to me. And I wanted her to have a job that, again, sort of incorporated all of the best parts of who she was as a person. And I felt that television news is a job that would do that. And I also think I've always been just a little bit homesick for the newsroom ever since I had that job. And so this was an opportunity to sort of go back and remember and explore that fantastic job and the fantastic people that I worked with. I loved my coworkers in the newsroom, and I'm still in contact with a lot of them today. So it was sort of a journey back in time to a special time in my life and a job that I absolutely loved.
Yeah, it's a special kind of job. I think we all feel that way. Your sense of humor comes through in this book all the time. How much of Nikki's day-to-day issues, raising children and working from, home as well, how much of that comes from your own life?
You know, after I worked in the newsroom, I moved out to Washington, D.C. to become a press secretary and work on Capitol Hill. And I eventually ended up at the Department of Commerce, and I was the director of public affairs. And my husband, my newly married husband, we had just gotten married, he was working at the State Department. And there was a day when we were both in Beijing on the same day. He was with the Secretary of State, I was with the Secretary of Commerce, and we were going to try and have dinner together. And of course, that didn't end up happening. And I realized in that moment that, well, when we have kids, somebody has to stay back in North America and take care of the baby. So how is that going to work? So when our first child was born, I decided that I would stay home with the baby and be a stay-at-home mom, and primarily just because of the logistics. And that is the hardest thing I have ever done. The transition from being a working person with a job, with coworkers I loved, and transitioning over to staying home with a colicky baby who wouldn't sleep. I had no friends because my friends were all still working. I had no family within 1,000 miles. It was a huge transition and a huge challenge. And I wanted to explore that in this book. And so when Nikki is, cleaning up shrapnel under the high chair, I remember I was doing that once, and I had spread the Washington Post under the high chair, and there was a profile of a friend of mine who had just gotten this enormous, gigantic job.
Oh, no.
And I was cleaning up spaghetti under the high chair, and she was off doing all these glamorous things. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? And so I wanted to explore that, the idea that we love our children, we want to be with them. At the same time, we are thoughtful, professional, interesting people, and we want to have interesting jobs. And there's always that push and pull. And how do we navigate that? And what are the trade-offs? And what is best for us as individuals, and what is best for our children and our families? Those are all things I wanted to explore in this book.
And you did. I think most of us know someone like Ainsley. I think we've all met someone like her, especially those of us who tried to, make all the meals on Sunday so that they'd be ready when we got home from work during the week. And we always wanted to be sure that we could keep up with the Ainsleys in the world. Was there anyone in your life that was an inspiration for Ainsley?
I think that as mothers, we all feel like we're supposed to be Ainsley. I feel like magazines, the internet, Pinterest, podcast, Instagram, I feel like everyone is trying to make us feel like, you really should be more like her. Yeah. She's got it all together. She's not feeding her children macaroni and cheese in a box. And I feel like we are constantly, as mothers, bombarded with these messages about how someone is doing it better and we should be doing it like her. And so Ainsley is sort of this amalgamation of those messages that we receive as mothers. And also with Ainsley, she sort of embodies this idea that I know I've had as a mother, and I know a lot of my friends have, which is if we can just control everything around us, everything's going to be okay. And of course, you can't control everything around you. And even if you could, everything still wouldn't be okay. And maybe things will still be okay, even if you don't control anything. But the idea that control and perfection means that you're a good mom and your children are going to turn out fine is this myth that I think a lot of us buy into. And I think it's a myth that society tries to sell a lot of women and a lot of mothers. And so that's sort of where Ainsley came from.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, to ask your children as they get older, what they remember of those days, because they have a totally different take on what we thought we were doing. Ainsley's secret could have remained hidden until one of your characters appears. Did she feel her current life would allow that secret to stay hidden once she was married to this man and, she had moved on from that past life? I always, as I was reading, I was thinking, didn't she think at one time it would have to come out?
It's interesting. I thought about that when I was writing, and is this a secret that could legitimately have remained a secret? But as you read the newspaper, and I am a lifelong avid reader of the Washington Post, look at George Santos, right? I mean, yeah. He had all kinds of secrets, and he ran for election, and none of these things came out until much later. And there is a long history of members of Congress and people running for public office who had secrets that did not come out until later. So I do feel like it is entirely plausible that someone could have a secret like this. And also, I think that, Ainsley facing her secret was part of her accepting who she is utterly and completely, accepting her past, accepting her present, and that then allows her to grow into the person that she deserves to be and that she's always wanted to be, which is a person who is completely at peace with every part of her own story.
And don't you think Nikki did the same thing? Because I think Nikki had, at least from what I read, seemed to be questioning whether she could be. She felt when she was replaced, she was devastated. And here she had these 3 little children. I love the scene in the grocery store.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. Exactly. But here she is trying to be the good mother and still wanting to be that anchor. And I think in the end, don't you think her life ended up the same way as Ainsley in a different way?
I think Nikki had to find a way to ask for what she wanted, right? I think sometimes we're afraid as women to say, this is what I want, and this is what I want. This is what is ideal for me. And Nikki had to develop the confidence to ask for what she wanted, and also to know that her job is not who she is, that she can be a full and complete person regardless of what her job situation is, and that she does not need to have a big job in order to have worth as a person. And I think that's something that I struggled with when I quit working. Do I still have worth and value in society if I am not earning a paycheck? Do I still have worth and value if I am, changing diapers and cleaning up spaghetti on the floor? And I wanted Nikki to get to the point where she recognized that she is a worthy person regardless of what decision she makes, regardless of if she is a television anchor or a stay-at-home mom. Her choice is legitimate, and she still has value.
That's right. That's right. We have this partnership with a Facebook club called Novels and Latte. And I know that you've had a book on there, and people want to head over. There's a link on our screen for them to click on and have more of a conversation about, Friends with Secrets. And who knows, maybe they would end up getting a raffled free copy of themselves. I wanted to mention that you were nearly ready to give up for writing at one point in your life because you had a lot of rejection letters. So many of us have dealt with the same kind of thing. What was your experience like?
I think that I was writing the wrong thing. And I think that that's probably why it took me so long and I had so many struggles. But I started out writing YA, which I love to read. And it took me a while to get an agent. So there was a lot of rejection there. I finally got an agent. It took a while for then the books would go out on submission and there were no takers. And so it was rejection there. And then a friend of mine who's a writer read my Christmas letter that I send out every year. And she said, you have a women's fiction voice. You should be writing women's fiction. I'm like, really? And my family Christmas letter is very much like Friends with Secrets. It's the good, the bad, the ugly, hopefully told with humor. And so I dug up this manuscript that I had started writing after my first child was born. There are phrases in Friends with Secrets that I wrote 18 years ago when my first child was born. And I dusted that off and I started exploring all of these things that I'd experienced as a mom. And I sent that off to my agent and she said, yes, this is the one. She's like, this one's going to sell. And of course, at this point I thought, no, it's not. Why would it? None of the other ones have sold either.
Right.
But she was right. It did. And I think the reason I finally found success with this manuscript after well over a decade of rejection is because I was writing what I know. I mean, I know motherhood. I know little kids. I know the sacrifices and the challenges that we face as moms. And when I just wrote this book from my heart, I think that's why this was the book that sold. And I think that's why I finally was able to be published after more than a decade of trying, was because I wrote what I know.
So now these books that are unpublished in your drawer, those are the YAs that you just have kind of left aside. And what have you moved on to? I'm sure you're starting something else.
Well, I'm trying to do another book that is sort of similar in tone and style to Friends with Secrets. So I want to continue to explore motherhood. And I'm sort of intrigued by looking at the way that motherhood has changed from the past and the way it is now. And I think a lot of us sort of idealize, the 1960s, the stay-at-home mom who was always there for her kids, making nutritious meals. And I'd like to look at what was motherhood really like back in the 1960s.
The Stepford Wives.
And sort of, but also then contrasting that with the cult of busyness and how, you're only a good mom if your child's in 19 different activities and you're running yourself ragged, driving them all over, and sort of contrasting the past with the present and sort of examining the cult of busyness those are sort of things that I'd like to delve into in this next book. So I'm sort of working on some stuff around that, and I've got a few chapters and a half painted synopsis that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and so that's kind of what I'm working on now.
It is real interesting because mothers back then did so many other things. I can remember being the block mother. So when the kids came home from school, they would come to my house if there was an issue. I mean, even to the point of a little boy from across the street coming over and saying, "I need a diaper." You know, some of the mothers who worked, and I was one of the ones that, made the brownies. And, at that part of my life, made the brownies. So I'm anxious to see how this new one comes out. What is your writing style? Are you a person, did I read that you like to try to write early in the morning before your family is actually up and about?
I think for a long time, I would write really early in the morning, especially in the summer. I still do that. I try and get up at about 5 and read earlier if I can and write before the house wakes up. Now that my kids are in school all day, it's a little easier. So I drop everybody off and then I sit down and I write. I work best in the morning. And so I try and get as much done as I can in the morning and then save the afternoon for, other things that don't require so much brain work. I love rewriting. I could rewrite all day long. Plotting is much harder for me. I sometimes wish someone would just say, "Here's the plot. Now you write the book," because the words and the writing and the dialogue for me is a really fun part. And the coming up with the plot is sometimes harder for me. But I love rewriting.
So you try to be a plotter, but you become a pantser.
I am totally a pantser, yes. I think that's why I don't like plotting, because I don't know what's going to happen next. And so there's just a lot of wasted time where you're writing in one direction and then you see later, oh dear, I should have been writing in the other direction. People say, "What's your process?" And I'm like, think of the most inefficient process you can. And that seems to be the process that I have.
Yeah. So I think a lot of us have, that push-pull. I want to be the plotter. And when you're working in news, it's always, nonfiction, and it's always pretty steady. There's usually a formula, and you do that. And then when you try to veer from that, I think that was the hardest thing for me, was to start writing fiction that isn't real, that isn't real. It isn't really happening down the street. And I felt like a liar, or maybe I wasn't, what was I doing? This isn't real. So if you come from that background, it's harder, I think, to write fiction. Maybe that is something also that you're dealing with.
I never thought about that before, but that is so true. Like every once in a while, I'll have this feeling like, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to just make this stuff up? Is this okay? And it hadn't occurred to me that it might be from having a background in journalism where, no, you're not allowed to make anything up. But I do sort of feel that way. Like, gosh, can I really just say that happened? And yes, it is interesting. I also have a problem sometimes with, I think from having been in journalism, I'm very concerned that everything be very clear.
Yeah.
Everyone understand exactly what's going on and exactly where people are sitting and exactly what's happening. And my agent reminds me sometimes, well, let's try and make this a little more subtle. And subtlety is not my thing, because I'm always very concerned that everything be very clear. And so that's something else that I feel like every book I get better, and every book gets deeper. Every book has more layers and more nuance, and that's one of the things that I've learned in this book was as we were going through and working on the plot. My agent was like, let's make this a little more nuanced. Let's keep them guessing a little longer, and I feel like that was excellent advice.
I think that is excellent advice. I know there are times when I have these little 3x5 index cards, like you would have done the documentary, and when you try to veer from that storyline, it doesn't feel right for a while until you get into it. So, I don't know. It's kind of crazy what happened. For someone who has just released your first novel, at least women's fiction novel, you have a lot of a lot on your website to offer. You're now offering a newsletter, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that work for you?
Everyone says, "Oh, you're an author now. You need to have a newsletter." But I didn't want it to be a newsletter where it just says, "Buy my book, buy my book, buy my book." I wanted to give something to these people who have been so kind and supported me and are willing to sign up for my newsletter. And so instead, what it is it's a series of essays. It's called Notes on Love and Laundry. And I just finished the one that's going out next week, and it's about the strange and mysterious death of pantyhose. It's about how we all used to have to wear pantyhose, and now suddenly we don't. And like, what happened? Who killed pantyhose? And thank goodness they did. So it's a series of hopefully humorous essays. It's designed to make you smile because I wanted it to be a newsletter where you scroll through, you read it, it makes you laugh, and then you move on to your day. And it'll have a little bit of book news too to sort of keep people posted on what's happening, what's coming next. But I wanted to give people something that would make them smile. So that's where Notes on Love and Laundry came from. And so I just started that at Christmas. It was, my mother, my sister, and my aunt, and now it's grown. So that's been exciting to watch that happen.
So now they're in trouble. And also you're doing some blogs, I understand. Tell me.
I was doing blogging for a long time with a bunch of YA writers, and that was really fun. And then when I transitioned over to women's fiction and started writing my own newsletter, I stopped doing that. But I post a lot of my newsletter content on Substack. And so I recently discovered Substack and have been doing that. And I love Substack. It's wonderful. I feel like there are so many really talented, thoughtful people just generating all this content, and it's just there for you to read. And I could get lost on Substack for hours just reading fascinating essays on all kinds of things. It's like this magical magazine that never runs out of pages. So I've started posting on Substack, and that to me has been a lot of fun.
And when you have some spare time, who do you like to read?
I seem to like dead English authors. I don't know why. Of course, I'm
dead English authors.
A huge Jane Austen fan. And so there's a few references to Jane in Friends with Secrets. Barbara Pym is one of my all-time favorite authors. No one's ever heard of her, but I adore her. She's wonderful. Living authors, I'm a huge Lynn Rarity fan, and I just ordered her newest book, and I'm waiting for that to come out. I really love English novelists. I don't know why. I'm an English and a mass comm broadcast journalism major, and so I don't know. There's just something about English authors that I just really enjoy their voices. I just really enjoy dead English authors. So when I am not rereading them, I'm reading women's fiction. I'm reading Lynn Rarity, and I'm reading Liz Talley, and I'm reading Sharon Wishnow. She's one of my fellow debuts at Lake Union. I'm reading Heather Leggett. She just has a new debut out. So I'm reading women's fiction, but when I'm not, I'm reading dead English authors.
Dead English authors. I love it. I love it. I was once asked if I could have 3 people over for dinner, who would they be? And it was hard for me to come up with, 3 people that my God, I could have anybody. You would have a very quiet dinner.
Want to be dead?
They'd all be dead. Yeah, they'd all be dead.
Oh dear. The author of Bridget Jones's Diary, I'd have her. I think Helen Fielding is still very much alive, so I would include her and Lynn Rarity too. She sounds like she would be a lovely, wonderful, funny person to have to dinner. So I'd include them.
That's great. Are you making any appearances or book signings new that we need to know about?
In November, I am speaking to a mystery book group at a Barnes & Noble in Springfield, Virginia. I'm also doing an event in November at a library in Falls Church, Virginia. Oh. And then I'm hoping to do a Midwestern swing and go back to Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, which is where I'm from.
Where you're from, yeah.
Events, but unfortunately, I don't want to. I grew up back there in the winter. I don't want to be back there in the winter because I don't remember how to drive on ice anymore. So hopefully I can do that.
No, you don't. Oh, absolutely not. I remember living down in Arlington, Virginia, when Falls Church was just brand new and the people were just moving in, and it has so changed. I remember going to an area down there called the Mixing Bowl. I don't know if they still call that the Mixing Bowl, but it brought back some memories also. Yeah, so this tour should be really memorable, I would think.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. So I'm working on that right now.
Exactly. Well, I've enjoyed talking with you so much today. I want to thank you for being with us, and I wish you continued success. And I look forward to reading this next book. I'm really interested in what happened to the pantyhose. I'm reading that newsletter.
Sign up for Notes on Love and Laundry,
I think I just signed up for the newsletter. I'm really looking forward to the pantyhose story. But anyway, thank you so much, Christine. I've really enjoyed it, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you, Carole. This has been so much fun. I appreciate it.
Okay. You take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.